Okay, everybody ready?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Hold
Okay.
on.
The regular virtual meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Greater Boca Raton Beach and Park District is now called to order. It is Monday, July 6th, 2020. The time is 5:15 p.m. JoAnn, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ernst,
Here.
Commissioner Engel,
Here.
Commissioner Rollins,
Here.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Here.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
Thank you, JoAnn. Commissioners, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, good. It is now time for public requests. Brianne said that there is one to read into the record, and then we have some call-ins. So Brianne, would you like to start with the one that was written?
Sure. I also had just a comment from Mr. Duquette, who sent an email prior to the meeting, and he just wanted me to reiterate the importance of working with residents to decide on Boca Chica amenities. And then we have from Jim Miller, who is president of the Friends of Gumbo Limbo. Madam Chair and Commissioners, these are difficult times and it is a challenge to put together a good financial plan and budget. Friends continues to work with the city and the district staff to come up with plans to address the most important needs of Gumbo Limbo, and you have a draft budget for 2021, which we believe does that. There are concerns about the cost of two big projects, the tower and the seawater supply. It is important that while the full master plan is not realistic now, we need to deal with immediate critical issues at the center that are in the project line called GL Master Plan. We urge the commissioners to move ahead with the proposal, and Friends will continue to work with the city and the district as more information is developed. Please note that the Friends of Gumbo Limbo is functioning. We are working with the center to continue and expand service to our community and protect our natural resources. Our veterinarian team is still treating stranded and injured turtles. Release and track programs continue. Online educational and promotional work is being done, and Friends continues to work on new practices and plans to be a better partner and keep the Gumbo Limbo Nature Center among Friends' elite environmental educational facilities. For now, we encourage you to support the financial plan for Gumbo Limbo. Thank you. Sincerely, Jim Miller, President, Friends of Gumbo Limbo, 480 East Boca Raton Road, Boca Raton, Florida. And then I have two people that wanted to speak. One is Mr., I hope I pronounce this right, Silberti, and then Mr. Travieso. If you all are on the line, if you want to raise your hand by pressing *9, we can see you and get you on. Oh, I have somebody here, so. The phone number ending with 6965, you are unmuted.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I was hoping to speak after Mr. Celebrity, but here I go. Commissioner,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry?
Would you give your name and address, please?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Commissioners, I am Raul Travieso, and I reside at 1037 West Royal Palm Road. I am the USA Pickleball Association Boca Raton and Florida Southeast District Ambassador. My volunteer duties include assisting other local ambassadors between Martin and Monroe County in promoting and expanding the sport of pickleball. As such, during the last 4 years, I and other resident players have spoken before this commission on several occasions regarding the increasing demand for dedicated pickleball courts. In fact, last month, Brianne read my comments regarding the need for more courts. On behalf of our over 300 followers, I wish to take this opportunity to provide the support for Mr. Celebrity's proposal to repurpose the abandoned tennis courts at Boca Chica and convert them into a pickleball complex. The demand for pickleball courts is exploding, and we must get in front of this popularity. Local residents continue to express their gratitude for the first and only outdoor courts at the city's El Rio Park. The 4 courts at El Rio have been extremely busy with many players waiting to play. I am sure that you're aware that many regional private communities advertise pickleball as their #1 amenity. As a matter of fact, almost all of the gated communities throughout the greater Boca Raton taxing district have pickleball complexes for their residents. And yet the rest of the citizens only have 4 daytime unlit courts to share. Pickleball is no longer a retiree sport, as younger players are now emerging. 2 years ago, I chaired a train-the-trainer program with other volunteers to teach over 80 Palm Beach County physical education teachers how to play the game. As a result, pickleball is being taught at elementary, middle, and high schools throughout the county. To address the lack of courts, Palm Beach County Recreation has converted 2 underutilized tennis courts to 6 pickleball courts at Okehili Park, Lake Lytle Park, and John Prince Park. The approximate cost for repurposing these courts at each park is about $50,000. In addition, 6 brand new courts are budgeted for this fiscal year at the South County Regional Park, just west of us. I believe that the Beach and Parks District and the city should become proactive and create dedicated lighted pickleball courts. The 4 dedicated courts at El Rio are just not enough. Throughout the city, we have an abundance of lighted tennis courts. Your constituents are asking for pickleball courts. Here are our recommendations for consideration. Number 1, as promoted by Mr. Celebrity, refurbish and convert the abandoned tennis courts at Boca Chica to pickleball. Number 2, we propose that the district, with the city's support, consider transforming 2 tennis courts at Patch Reef or the Swim and Racket Club, which would still maintain a surplus of over 15 tennis courts. Nationally, there are a multitude of successful tennis/pickleball centers. And number 3, move forward with the delayed phase 2 of the Spanish River Athletic Park. This is the ideal venue to build a lighted pickleball complex. Finally, the exploding growth, my time's up?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Madam Chair, I just have one question, if I might, of Raul. What about the pickleball play at the facility, the gymnasium at Sugar Sand Park? Are you not using that for pickleball?
No, we have, that's correct. We have, Mr. Rollins, we have 6 temporary courts there during the year. Monday through Friday, we play in the mornings. However, since the pandemic, that facility has been closed, and there's no anticipated opening date for that facility.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Raul. Is there someone else, Brianne? You're on mute.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Anthony Ciliberti, and I'm the president currently of Condo 4, which is the in Boca Chica, which is the closest condominium to the tennis courts in all of Boca Chica. Basically, I wanted to go over a little bit of page 4 of the request for proposals, or page 13 of the package I received. Number 2, under the scope of work, and it says the design purpose should address a minimum of the following. Letter I, the innovative recreational concepts, northwest corner utilizing the courts and parking lot currently in place. Example, pickleball, tennis, art-inspired course, obstacle course, I think it says. I wanted to, I'm like a self-appointed, myself and another friend of mine, kind of committee person that I just wanted to look into it a little bit. The other person is a structural engineer, so we did take a quick look at it. I'm a CPA, and I see on the 3 corners you have a budget of $10,000 per corner, $20,000 per corner, $30,000 per corner. And if there's a plan to utilize the courts, which I'd be naive to think that there wouldn't be, and I realize it's for all of Greater Boca Raton, a natural transference at this point in time in I think today's society would be pickleball for the tennis courts. However, designated $30,000 for a corner for landscaping and to do a recreational facility is light. Now, I don't think that we have to spend all that much money. I did look at it with a structural engineer, and converting the tennis courts to pickleball courts, the infrastructure is already there. There is 200 amps coming in. There's also the base, the pavement itself for the tennis courts. And pickleball courts don't need really high fences like tennis courts. Yes, maybe where the traffic would be, then we would go as high as maybe a tennis court. But basically, the linear foot for fencing wouldn't be as much as the typical tennis court. And as the president of Condo 4, I believe that basically if there is a conversion, and to, like I said, be naive to think there wouldn't be a conversion, pickleball would be the most useful and enjoyed amenity for the greater Boca Raton area. It is very popular, like Raul said, and I believe that, it would get the least resistance. There are a number of other options that, I realize Boca Chica and Condo 4 has no control over, but other options, I know for a fact some of them would be, be very, I'd hear a lot of it saying, why didn't I do something about it? And I was like, well, I can. I'm trying to do something, take the best possibility that we're going to have. Now, basically, I'm estimating $50,000 to $75,000 for conversion of tennis courts, but I'm looking at this as a separate project, not one of the four corners that include all the landscaping. This is a separate recreational facility. So I'm a CPA. I could tell you that it could be done much cheaper than starting from scratch. Like I said, the infrastructure is there, and the conversion would be very easy. Now, right now, there's 6 tennis courts, which the court surface would be, on a regulation tennis court, 16,848 square feet. A pickleball court is much less. The standard tennis court is 78 by 36 feet, which is 2,808 square feet. The standard pickleball court is 20 by 44 feet, which is 880 square feet. So basically, just the court surface alone, you'd be able to put 19 pickleball courts in that space. Now, I'm not suggesting we put 19 pickleball courts, but as far as $30,000 to $50,000 getting a few in there, that I see that very doable, very possible, very easy conversion. It would need its own budget, though. I mean, it is a separate. You're talking about like a facility inside a park. So, I mean, I could further explore it if I think that there's going to be room in the budget. If the budget was only like $30,000 max per corner for the 3 corners, no, I don't think it could be done on the CPA. I mean, I don't see it between the landscaping and all the requirements that are set up within the proposal.
Mr. Silverberg.
Okay, my time's up, but I thank you for listening.
Can you give us your address? You didn't give your full address.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
My name's Anthony Siliberti, and I live at Condo 8 in Boca Chica, but I'm the president of Condo 4 in Boca Chica. At 6200 Northwest 2nd Avenue, Unit 315.
Oh, we're much appreciative. Thank you very much. Do you have any more?
We have Mr. Galanis wants to speak.
Okay. Hi, Greg.
Hi, guys. How is everybody?
We're good. How are you?
Doing well. I get on a little bit late, so my apologies if I'm covering some ground that you guys have already covered. But
right.
I have been on. What?
Your name and address, please.
Oh, 1780 Southwest 22nd Ave. You guys should have it memorized by now, Suze.
I know, but we have to do it for the record.
Okay, I understand. I'm going to be very brief. And again, my apologies if you've already covered some of this ground. But I'm not real sure why we're talking about pickleball courts, golf course beautification, and walking trails, okay? We've spent $25 million in taxpayers' money for a golf course, and we're paying $3 million a year in debt service. We need to get razor focused. This is not the Boca Chica recreational resort over there. We need to put some money into this thing. We need to get the city off the dime. I'm hoping you guys have an update from the city. And in the absence of that, I think we need to proceed with legal pressure on the city for unreasonably withholding approval of the design. I understand everyone's dealing with a lot with the virus and all of that, but at the end of the day, they've had this thing for way too long and they need to move forward. But I would request that you guys stay razor focused. I don't want to hear about pickleball courts. I don't want to hear about planting flowers at the entrance of Boca Chica or even walking trails on the golf course. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Greg. Is there anyone else, Brianne?
I may have one more person. They're just having trouble getting into the meeting. Can we give 1 second?
Sure.
I have Mr. Chaffee. Are you going to speak as you were unmuted there?
Can you hear me?
Your name and address, Harold?
It's gone again.
Gone again.
Now, okay, now you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hello,
Hi, name and address, Harold?
my name is Harold Chaffee. I live at 6200 Northwest 2nd Avenue, apartment 420. Says your video has stopped.
We can hear you, Mr. Chaffee.
Okay, I can't hear anything on my television, that's why. I just wanted to agree with what Greg had said. You know, the object is to complete the golf course. That's what your goal is. You know, we keep on wanting to think about things we can do. We're going to beautify the three corners. We're going to build a pickleball court, whatever. You know, I heard so many excuses about the pandemic, that the city is overwhelmed. They really, you know, the only thing they can focus in on is that, but yet they can make an $8.5 million, basically, they can spend and make an agreement to basically get a quote or whatever it is and proceed on the wildflower for $8.5 million. If they can do that, we're waiting 5 years for this, for a decision, only a yes or a no on this golf course.
Did we lose you again?
I don't know, can you hear me? I can't see anything. It says speaking done on my television. And anyway, like I said, I'd like to see if we can just proceed with this. The other thing too was riding around yesterday, and I'm going down Military, turning down Spanish River. As I passed that school that's there, I'm not sure it's a high school or a grammar school, I saw like 10 or 12 tennis courts actually empty. All these schools are shut down. No one's at the schools. If you talk about opening up something for pickleball, I don't know how difficult it is or what's involved in basically redoing a tennis court or just moving a net. You know, but there's so many like high school and grammar schools all shut down, and all those tennis courts are just vacant. If they really want to play, if they really want to push the issue, you know, they'd have to get a hold of the county and find out. But it would be an idea rather than spend $60,000 for pickleball courts over here at Boca Chica. They're going to be taken up in a year because that's where the staging area is for all the equipment to do the golf course. It's just such a waste of money. We should just focus in on one thing, and let's get an answer. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night and be safe.
You too. Anyone else, Brianne?
I do. I'm actually going to call this person in just to speak through my phone because they're having a hard time dialing in. So.
Okay.
You are on the meeting now.
Okay.
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Bruce Diller Verstandig, 140 Southeast 5th Avenue, Boca Raton, 33432. So I think the pandemic should be a wake-up call because A, there's going to be a lot less tax revenue coming in eventually, a year down the road, 2 years down the road. I think it's possibly time to really look at what you're going to do with Ocean Breeze. Let's look at the reality of it. The city just extended another extension for GL Homes. Okay, GL Homes has $2 million invested in this project. The Beach and Parks District has $1 million. Okay, you know what? There is deeds that say that you have to put golf on there. But did golf even come in the top 5 of the needs assessment? I think it's really time to look and go, okay, what kind of golf can we put on Ocean Breeze and what can we do for the rest of the community? Because building a $30 million golf course is not going to happen in the next 10 years. The reality is golf didn't even get back to its 2010 level, which I think was the highest. Just one more thing. There are more golf courses closing than there are opening. So I think that's something to look at. And I don't foresee Boca Muni actually being sold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verstandig. Anyone else? Brianne?
I am looking. If there's anybody else that wants to speak, if you press *9, we can see that your hand is raised to speak. I do not see anybody else.
Okay, hearing none. Public requests are now closed. It's time for the approval of the minutes of the regular virtual meeting that was held on June 15th, 2020. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? JoAnn, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
You're on mute, Erin.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, JoAnn. We now come to the portion of the meeting for regular business. The first item is a pedestrian gate at the Swim and Racket Club. Melissa, would you like to give us an update on page 8 of the agenda?
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, in your packet on page 8 and 9, I called 2 different fencing companies to get some competitive quotes for a fence and with a punch pad key lock, a punch pad lock so no key is needed to go in between the back neighborhood and the Swim and Racket Center. So you have the quotes in front of you, one for $2,950 and one for $2,980. And this will be a black aluminum fence made to somewhat closely match what's already around the Swim and Racket Center.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Melissa? Melissa, can you hear me?
Okay.
I have a question. I mean, did you have a feeling about one company or the other?
No, I mean, I think both of these companies would do really well. One of them did quote the 2,951 is a mechanical punch lock. I'm very familiar with those. They're used a lot in athletic facilities, both indoor and out. They require no power. They require no battery, which I think is nice because you don't have to worry about a battery dying. You have a little tool. You can go and open the back up and change the lock combination easily if you need to do so. And then the one from Zepco is a battery operated one, so you would have to worry about whether the battery died or not.
So the XL fencing did not require any electricity or any battery, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, just to Melissa, Melissa, did you check out any references to either of these two vendors as far as past work and satisfaction with the previous users of their service?
I have not checked out on Zebco as of yet. I'm happy to make calls if that's who you go to. I know that all their, I only called companies that had good Yelp ratings as a start. I know that we have done work with XL Fencing. They've been very responsive and they've done a great job.
So, Madam Chair, I have a question for Melissa.
Go forward, Mr. Ernst.
Hey, Melissa, this is Craig. My limited experience with these kind of fences is through my nonprofit experience when we had to build a fence around a playground because changes were required at the Y. And and it also was at our church, the 7-foot high fence with the 6 panels and stuff like that. Because of the height, it means the length of the pipes are pretty long and narrow. And what we found when we had to put up a height of a fence like that is that it's the gauge of aluminum that they use for them, because little kids quickly bent the fence right open. And so I know we want to put in the right type of fence and make sure that it doesn't get destroyed right away, but I think you probably do want to take a closer look at the durability and the gauge of aluminum that they use for each of the fence posts, because the taller, longer it is, without any kind of proper bracing in the middle or anything, and that creates a step to get over it, you do have some, it could be wasted money. So I just ask if you do know the gauge of the aluminum, and if you don't, which I don't expect it right now, but I would suggest seeing and reviewing it before putting it in, because there is a risk that it's just wasted effort to put anything in there.
That's great, Craig. I will look into that. I don't know the gauge right off the top of my head. When I talked to both these companies, I took them up and we took a look at the aluminum fencing that was in the back of the building, and I asked them to quote a similar, but duly noted, and you are correct. I will make sure that we get that gauge. Good point.
Or make it strengthen it, reinforce. It has to be reinforced so it can't be pulled apart, so someone can slide through.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, are there any other questions? I would suggest that we defer this until she can get the correct information and also get the references for ZEP code. Also, I'd like to have those. Are there any other questions for Melissa? Okay, Melissa, you've got your work cut out for you on that, please. Our second item of business is the golf course beautification RFP. Brianne.
Commissioners, I put together the RFP. You all saw a copy of it at our last meeting, and I made some revisions to the scope of work. And we went through this, Jacob read through it as far as the legal side of it. This is a design build RFP. And I think basically our focus tonight is on the scope of work, which was referenced in the public comments earlier tonight. If there was any feedback, I'm here to hear it.
Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions, Mr. Rollins?
I have no questions, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Right. Erin, you good? Guess she is. Craig?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I read through it. I just want to make sure that we're talking about any kind of bushes and shrubbery that can provide a little bit of security as well, in terms of, if it can be done, hiding pathways to the condos or whatever, because there was some emails in regards to this that they were concerned about security, in terms of opening this up. So if there's any deterrent, which state is here, that would prevent vehicle and all varieties from accessing the golf course. So, you know what I mean? Just trying to add some more deterrent in terms of getting closer to the condos and things like that. So if you get close to that area, you know what I mean?
You're looking for me to expand on B, to talk a little bit more about that, or?
Yeah, I guess try to prevent vehicles and people, I guess, or, unwanted or, people,
Trespassing?
yeah, trespassing in the condo area or the golf course area.
Okay. Mr. Ernst, do you have any comments?
The only comment I had is I'm sensitive to the feedback that people have voiced so far earlier in the public comments, as the laser focus on golf or not. But I guess for clarification and communication to everyone who may be listening, it is my understanding that this cost that we approved and to do gives us budget options, 3 different options. It's all material that could be reused potentially in the golf course, and it's also designed to reduce the need to have fencing up, which is a rental expense. So the longer this kind of continues on, this will kind of pay for itself to some degree. It is still our intention to go forward with the master plan of a project of a golf course, and thus that's why the budget is so small. It's not a massive investment, but it's intended to offset all the current ongoing costs and at least make it look a little bit better than it currently is.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, this is Bob, real quick. As far as addressing Aaron's concern, I mean, there may be some areas where we have shrubbery of some nature that's will beautify the area, but you could end up concealing, these bollards that may prevent unauthorized access by vehicles to the course. If you follow what I'm talking about, I mean, they could be, the shrubbery can be in such a way that it would deter somebody, but if you had some barrier behind that that's obscured, that might be one way to upgrade the security from the access to the golf course, preventing ATVs and the like from going on the course. Just a passing comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Mr. Engel?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First, these improvements, as Mr. Ernst said, are temporary. So we're looking at maybe a couple of years at the outside. And I too am sensitive to the needs and wants of the community. But I'm wondering whether something like pickleball will be practical, unless it's something that at some point we can keep as a permanent feature. So my question is, can we keep a pickleball court, if constructed, as a permanent feature of the golf course?
It wasn't part of the design that was over there originally. We could certainly talk to Wayne about implementing that, but it was not part of the 18-hole design of the west side, the one that we're waiting on approval from the city for.
And if we kept it as a permanent feature, how would it affect the golf course? Would it impede the playability? Would it affect accessibility to the course?
There were tennis courts over there while it was a golf course in the past. So I guess from a historical perspective, it happened before, but I'd have to talk to Wayne to talk about his design and how it would impact the holes and the way they've run the course over that on that side.
Yeah. May I speak, Madam Chair?
Mr. Rollins has the floor.
Okay.
I was just going to suggest that I think Harold Chaffee had a comment about the tennis courts over there at Don Estridge. And he's right. I've never seen those courts in usage, and they're adjacent to military, just behind just north of the baseball diamonds. And I'm just wondering if that might, now, because it's a public school, you're not going to be able to access those courts while the school is is running. But in the evening, you might be able to to have access to those courts. And the other thing too is that once this pandemic, once it ever gets out of the way, then the pickleball courts can, pickleball players can resume their play Monday through Friday over at the air-conditioned field house in Sugar Sand Park. I think that's what's probably causing some wait time at the facilities over there at Hillsborough, Rio, having the field house being actually closed to outside activity. And maybe that's something that should be explored anyway about opening up. I'm not sure if you can play tennis outdoors. I don't know why, except for the fact that it's indoor. I don't know why we couldn't explore opening that back up for the pickleball.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Mr. Ernst?
Yes, to touch base on Steve's comment, I too kind of thought, well, I don't like the idea of having fence around, recreation abilities, and that's kind of where this started a little bit. And the idea of trying out pickleball was an option over there. But I also recognize where we're at with the golf course, and the more we make changes to it, the more difficult it is to try to implement the changes to go forward. As a quasi, compromise to the solution, my suggestion would be continue with the landscaping concept. Let's see where we go with it. We haven't assigned anything. But as far as the golf course goes, we have a plan, a master plan design that we've implemented, and we need to stick with that plan that we have out there. Because it could take a while to work things out with the city. I always have hope that the city will partner with us in some way or form. So we may have to make adjustments, but right now we've got our design out there, and we need to get an answer on that. And until we get one, we can't do anything. In the spirit, and I was going to save it to the later on the comments for pickleball, I was quite surprised when my son came home over the weekend and said he was at El Rio Park playing pickleball, and how much it was quite hot. He said, couldn't you put one of those low nets over at the sunshade nets that would help it immensely? And I said, yeah, I could, but it's not our park. It's something that would love to have more shade in our community. But I think the message from Raul can be solved with looking at where we can take existing courts and possibly converting those into some level of pickleball. And we do have a number of courts, both at the Swim and Racket Center and at Patch Reef. Let's focus on what's in our backyard. And the third option is next to the field house. I don't know what level of usage. I hate to take away anything from the basketball players, but if any of those, that used to be a field hockey area, if that could be converted into outdoor pickleball on a quicker basis, maybe that would help eliminate some of or alleviate the need. But the point is well taken. We need to add pickleball. And that's assuming that pickleball came through on the needs assessment. We still have not had our full assessment review of the needs assessment, but I'm kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt that my thought on coming onto this group and continuing this group is support what volunteers want. If Raul wants pickleball courts, we'll give him some pickleball courts. We should focus more what those community volunteers who organize those things and how can we help them do that. I thought Boca Chica would be an ideal place to at least explore it, but it was never a long-term solution because I'm pretty confident in saying that the design of the course is too small and they needed everything they could for including the current tennis courts for finishing out. That was the premiere at the end of the game of the 18th hole, as I recall. So it really is needed to have an 18-hole course out at Boca Chica. So my suggestion is to let's focus more on just working on the plan with the city and taking the pickleball. How do we expand it either at Sugar Sand, Patch Reef, or at the Swim and Racket Center in even a smaller, modest way, because that seems to be the trend of where people are going.
Thank you, Mr. Ernst. I do have some concerns because my emails have been running 50-50 for and against. And the objection is not money from the residents, but the noise. Since the pandemic, a lot of people are working remotely from home, and they say that the noise is just when the people were out there playing and, it wasn't a regulation court or anything. The noise was just annoying. So Jacob, I have a question for you. Is that something that we have a responsibility as far as noise control? How does that work?
Well, ultimately, it's a policy decision whether to install or maintain pickleball courts at that location. The board obviously should consider input from the community when determining what to put there, but at the end of the day, the decision rests with this board as to what amenities we want to put at that location, pickleball being one of several options. But as Brianne indicated, we have the design for the golf course, and ultimately, whatever we do put there would need to be accommodated within the framework of that design. But to the extent the board wanted to consider pickleball or any other option, that's something that this board would ultimately control the answer to.
Thank you, Jacob.
Madam Chairman, I have just a quick question.
Of course.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the city put in their budget, or the last one that I saw for 2021, to develop phase 2 with pickleball courts as part of the component of that facility. I don't know where that stands now, but that's probably the best way to get something permanent going. And in the interim, maybe there are some tennis courts in our inventory that we might be able to examine. I don't know about swim and racket or patch reef as far as the utilization of those facilities, but I know I've heard some people complain about the compatibility of pickleball with tennis in terms of the level of enthusiastic play as far as the noise coming from pickleball. I've never played it, so I'm just speaking from a point of view of someone having expressed that to me about there being a little bit different sound from a tennis ball hitting strings of a tennis racket as opposed to hitting a paddle with the pickleball. But certainly, if we can find a way to accommodate the folks, we can. I think over at Sugar Sand, we've done a pretty good job up until this pandemic of getting space inside for the pickleball folks to play in air conditioning Monday through Friday. Court time has been made available to them, and some days I think for half a day. So,
Jacob, is it a legal mandate that we can't have that the field house open, or could we open the field house?
I would want to look at that. I would want to look into that a little. Whether is there a CO on the field house? I mean, I'd like to know, what condition the field house is in and where it stands in the context of development and operation before answering that question.
Okay. If you
Madam Chairman, I was just over there today and saw Jim that runs it, and the floor has just been refinished. The bleachers were going in today, and I think it's in very good condition right now for play if it were available. And I think that's worth exploring that possibility.
Jacob, would you look into that for us, please?
Yes.
Okay. Brianne, would you put that on for our next meeting?
Madam Chair, is it really a legal issue to look into? I thought it was more of a city decision and a Palm Beach County decision on sports, as you're going under the emergency orders, not under.
That was, I thought, for field use and not for a building, for an enclosed building. I'm not sure. That's why I want Jacob to look into it before we
work with Brianne collectively and find out the answer.
Okay.
I just don't want to step on any toes and go over somebody's head if we're not supposed to be using that.
Right, yeah, I think, but I guess my point is that the city is the operator of our facilities, and so it's no different than when the city opened and closed certain parts, where your answer has to go back to the city, who's also going to say what is available in the Palm Beach ordinance overall, and that leads to the state level if there is anything. But I thought a lot of things have been restricted under that order, period. And that's another reason why they're discouraging it.
I agree. That's why I would like Jacob to look into it.
Okay.
It depends on which phase we're in. I guess, are we in phase 2? Is that the reason why we're allowing team sports on fields?
I thought we were still in phase 1.
Still in phase 1?
Correct.
I thought. Because we're Palm Beach County, I think it was us and
Madam Chair, if I may, just very briefly, Palm Beach, Miami, and Broward were in essentially a limited phase 2. We were in phase 2 with certain exceptions in the governor's order that opened up the door for the county administrator to submit a plan to the governor for review. I don't know whether the Palm Beach County administrator has done that. We can confirm that as well, but we're in somewhat of a hybrid phase 2 currently, because certain provisions of phase 2 do apply to Palm Beach County, but there's a plan that the administrator needs to submit in order to bring us in line with certain other aspects, particularly related to business operations of phase 2.
Okay, so Brianne, getting back to the golf course, RFP, do you
Yes.
want to make adjustments to that before we vote on it?
Right now I'm at, adding some language for B about trespassing. I don't know if there's any other things that are specific that anybody wants me to add or take out. But if that's the only change, we can certainly make that and get this out and advertise next week.
Madam Chairman, just one comment there as far as the workers' compensation. I don't know that you're going to be able to put the district as an additional insured on the work comp policy. I've never seen that being done, certainly on the commercial liability, but the workers' comp policy is an absolute remedy for the contractor from injuries to the employees, except for the employer liability, which is a component of that. So I just want to alert you to the fact that if you have that requirement in there, a contractor may not be able to meet that provision.
We can strike that.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or any suggestions that you would like to have put into the RFP, commissioners? Hearing none, does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion
And
to
I'll
have,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
make a motion to have Brianne make those, the one adjustment in B that we discussed, and to get it out to bid next week.
And I second.
Thank you.
I think you want to amend it for Bob's comment to remove the additional insured requirement.
Yeah.
And to remove the comment that Bob made.
Thank you, Greg.
Still keeping workers' comp, just removing the
course.
additional insured. Yep.
Yep.
And still second.
Any other comments or questions? JoAnn, would you do a roll call vote?
Sorry. Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, JoAnn. Okay, item number 3 on page 35 of your agenda packet is the preliminary budget and CIP discussion. Brianne, would you lead us off, please?
Sure. Commissioners, in your budget, in your agenda packet starting on page 35, we look at some preliminary drafts of the budget. Our goal is that we need to set a tentative millage rate, and that is supposed to be done by the week of July 20th, which we have a meeting on July 20th. So if it doesn't happen tonight, we have that week to set it, no later than July 30th to set that. Once we set that rate, we can always go down. We cannot go up from that rate. We need to set that, and we also need to set our, we just need to set that rate by that date. So on page 35, it shows a budget with the current rate, which is 9147. It shows the rollback rate, which is on page 36 of 0.8818. We're looking at about an $800,000 difference in revenues from taxes. And we did plug in $5 million for next year for the golf course, just because that was what we had done on our original 5-year golf course plan. But that money can all be, as we go into CIP and start talking about projects, we can adjust those numbers. But in the end, either of these budgets will work, and we'll obviously work to do any projects that you guys put forth. It's just a matter of deciding on those two, between those two millage rates.
I had some questions that you submitted to the city, but we have not heard yet, which would impact a lot of the.
Correct. I did, thank you. I did send a list of questions to the city. They've given us a couple answers back, but not everything. So we are waiting for a lot of information back just to clarify some of the increases that are in this budget that they've submitted.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions you'd like for Brianne to submit to the city about the city budget or anything else?
Madam Chairman, I have a couple of questions. One that deals with the subsidy that we have for the Red Reef Golf Course. And I'm wondering, since the parking meters that are adjacent to the golf course are used primarily by the golfers, why that revenue is not used to actually defer whatever subsidy we might have for the shortfall of the Red Reef Golf Course. And I'd like an explanation on the amount of revenue that's coming from those parking meters and why it would not be considered a reasonable request to have that applied to the expenses of the golf course.
Bob, if I could clarify that for you, if you're playing golf at Red Reef and you park over there at the larger parking lot, if there's no room by the golf course, they give you a receipt to put into on your dashboard, and you don't have to pay if you're playing golf.
Doesn't change my mind at all about the parking revenue.
Wanted to clarify that to the public.
Yeah, but I think as long as we're paying the cost to maintain that property over there, the revenue that's generated, whether it's from beach stickers or from the parking meters, should be something that be considered in reducing our expense. Just looking at the expenses that we have for O&M in 2014, our O&M with the city was 12 million, almost 13 million, and now we're looking at somewhere in the $20 million 5 years later in the O&M. So I mean, we've got to start looking for some additional savings somewhere, and I'm just thinking that might be one that we would consider.
Good point.
The other question I have, and this is one that occurred to me today, is that we have in my business, we have this the PPP program where it reimburses. You get a loan from the SBA that is forgiven if you're using that to retain employees. I think you have to spend at least 75% of those funds on employees. The rest of it could be on things like rent and medical insurance and the like. I know that the county is being allocated a certain sum of money that'll help, that some of which will come to the city, and that's on a similar basis to our PPP program, if I'm not mistaken, that it'll serve to reduce some of their expenses. Now, the city has employees. They've been continuing to pay their employees, and from what I understand, some of them are getting time and a half, even though they were not actively employed. If the city is getting reimbursed for any of their employee expense, why should we not be a benefactor of that as well? Because if they're paying people who are normally working for us and they're getting reimbursed from that, I don't know why we have to absorb that. It seemed like unjust enrichment to me if they get that loan to cover their payroll, then we're still paying for the same people, if you understand what I'm saying. Is that something we can investigate, Brianne?
Yes, sure.
Good point, Bob.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Bob?
I'll get to some more later, but I don't want to hog the floor here.
Mr. Engel?
I'm looking at the budget, and a couple of things occurred to me, some of which are covered in the questions that Brianne is asking of the city, but these seem to be repetitive. We see these every year. First is providing slots or requesting employment slots for jobs that have never been filled or will not be filled going forward. This is, ever since I've been on the board, this has been an ongoing issue. And yeah, we don't spend the money if the jobs aren't filled, but we are, in a sense, taxed on it because the administrative budget request is based on the number of jobs that are requested. Secondly, the paying for those jobs, for those job slots, or allocating the money prevents us from allocating money to other needs, which may be more pressing. And like I said, this has been an ongoing thing, and I'd like to see the city give us a budget that will be realistic. If they're asking for argument's sake, 100 job slots, 100 positions, let's make sure that those 100 positions are going to be filled within reason. We don't need, for example, there's an opening at Gumbo Limbo that Brianne has questioned. What's the sense in doing that if you can find a volunteer to do it from Friends of Gumbo Limbo? Why not take that money and use it for something else? I want them to be realistic in what they're asking for and not just say, well, all right, we're going to ask for X, and even though we're going to use X minus 5. Another issue ongoing has been the request for vehicles. Now, the request has dropped the dollar amount, but we're still looking at what looks like an effective life for the vehicles that are used by the city, especially on the beaches, maybe a couple of years, maybe 3 years at the outside. And part of the problem, I think, is, yes, we have a problem using vehicles on the beaches, and salt erosion is a factor. But making sure the vehicles are maintained properly, and I'm not talking about the mechanical aspect, I'm talking about when they're put away at night, making sure they're sheltered from the elements properly. These are all things to take into consideration. And if we can add another year or another 2 years onto the effective life of the vehicle, that saves us money. And I'd like to see the city establish a protocol. As a matter of fact, when I first came on the board, I gave the city a protocol based on what we did when I was in the Army. And that's washing the vehicle down, making sure all the fluid levels where applicable are where they're supposed to be, reporting any problems to maintenance, making sure maintenance schedules are adhered to. And some of this, I've been told that this has been, that these protocols are being by and large adhered to, but my feeling is that if they were, we wouldn't be seeing 2-year effective lives, replacement lives for some of the vehicles that the city is using that we're paying for.
Is there anything else, Mr. Engel?
That's it for now. I'll have a couple of volumes for you later.
Okay. Mrs. Wright, do you have anything that you have any questions for Brianne to submit?
Not right now. I went over everything with her earlier this today. Just some specifics I had on the budget. But I didn't think we were doing specifics on the budget tonight. I thought we were just discussing the millage rate. Yeah. But I went over everything with her today, just a few things that I had. And yeah, I mean, I think the city does the best job that they can over at Spanish River, Steve. I don't know if you've been over there at the facility that they have, and they do the best they can in terms of putting those vehicles away to keep them from the elements. But they don't have a lot of space over there. But I think they do the best they can. So, and I think that, you know, a lot of stuff doesn't last very long over there. My parents used to live over there, and I mean, metals just get eroded away within a couple of years. So I think it's a difficult spot that they're in. But I think they do the best they can in terms of washing them down and all that stuff. So, but that's kind of where we're at with that until they get a new facility out there that's enclosed for the vehicles that they have, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I went over everything with Brianne, and then we'll be talking more once she gets the answers back, I think, from the questions that she had from the city.
Thank you. Craig, do you have something?
Yes, a couple things. First of all, I realize this budget is please understand, it's a work in progress, and it's still developing. And I think for everyone's benefit, we need to keep in mind it could get a little bit more difficult than we think, you know. And so even though, you know, we've reduced our interest earnings from 609,000 to 400,000, last month's interest in our account was $11,932. And basically you multiply that out times, that's on $25 million, which is pretty close to what we have here. That translates into about 132,000. So we're a little overestimating what our interest earnings are going to be. I think everyone's expecting interest earnings to be lower, and they're going to stay much lower. So, and the same thing with the park fees and services. If we've been shut this long, I think you're going to have a lot of hesitancy, and the only thing you're going to get is stickers for beach passes. And I don't know if there's going to be refunds for the time off that we couldn't use it, or other things that come along. Nevertheless, my whole point on all this is that we have to be far more conservative with our budget. And even what you see here and some of the expenses, I would hesitate to make any major commitments on any of the expense items. And so my question to the city staff, and I did have a call with a Zoom call with Brianne, Michael, Jill, and Michelle, just to cover some of the details of the things. And as Brianne is on top of it, she's got a number of the questions, and they are very good. The number one thing I would ask of the city is to help explain what they're going to do for encouraging our volunteers to take a more of a leadership role going forward. Because I personally believe that although you may get the millage rate this year, you may not get it next year. And there are some big expenses here that if we overcommit on the golf course, or we overcommit on anything, we could be in real trouble. So it's safer. The city is the entity with the largest amount of reserves, the largest buffer. We have to be particularly careful. And so I would rather encourage as much as possible, no reduction in staff or anything like that, but encourage the city to leverage its volunteer base for all aspects, including, you know, anyone who is at the front desk. So when there is someone who is not there, we got to have a better plan of, you know, having more volunteers at over at Sugar Sand and at Gumbo Limbo, and anything that kind of takes away from the volunteers' time, I don't think I'm very supportive of it. I'd rather see the city embrace it and see how we can leverage that up. So that would be my only comment, to let them show us how they're going to use more volunteers going forward. And for us, as we get to this next round, we're going to have a little bit sharper pencil as things have progressed in the progress. And it's wishful thinking on the golf course to think that we'll be able to commit to that, because you could have such a sharp drop off, you just don't realize it.
I have one question on the Gumbo Limbo front desk. Used to be manned by volunteers, so I'm not sure why that's changed. So maybe that's something that we can talk about with Jim Miller.
I did talk to Jim today. You know, he doesn't necessarily have the answer to that, but the Friends did previously take all the revenues in for programs and activities. Last year, we funded a computer, and city staff was going to take it over, and we would start getting those revenues from programming, which we did not get prior. If we do go ahead and fill and create a part-time position for that, that would pretty much eliminate the revenues that we were collecting at that point. So I think the Friends would be willing to take that back over. It's just that was a decision made by the city as far as how they wanted to operate.
Okay, well, maybe that could be discussed and we would be able to save the 22,000 or whatever it was for that, you know, that position up front. You know, those are like the little things that we could do. So
Good suggestion. Anything else? Brianne has all of my questions and she's already submitted them to the city. So, I mean, they're kind of on my part, they're kind of nitpicky, but I'd like to have some answers about education and, you know, the educational training for the staff and things like that. So what is your pleasure, commissioners? Do you want to discuss the millage rate or do you want to put that on the agenda for the next meeting?
Madam Chairman, if I might, I think I expressed this at our last meeting, is that I don't know that anybody has a real appetite for increasing our taxes this year. So the two options would really be maintaining the same millage rate or going to rollback. If you go with the maintaining the same millage rate, that'd be advertised as an increase because the property values go up so that individuals would have an increase. A rollback just gives us the same amount of revenue with our millage rate that we took in last year. I started out when I first spoke about the budget and the tremendous increase. It's been in the last 5 years, we've had a 35% increase in our O&M. And a lot of it is in staffing and you know, the note that Michael Calvert indicated is that with the SEIU, they have a 5% increase in the salaries of those in the guaranteed increase by a union contract. That notwithstanding, you know, I feel like we're going to be probably struggling in the future for revenue with the special interest that Craig mentioned. I think that's going to probably be down as people start next year adjusting to you know, the COVID and getting back into the flow of things. If we go to rollback, I think we're going to need to especially sharpen that pencil, and there may be some pain involved for the city with staffing. But I think there's probably some things in there that if we said, okay, we'll give you the same amount for O&M this past year for this coming fiscal year as we did last year, what kind of stress would that put on the city? Probably a lot, given the union contract. But then we're going to have to find some other areas where we're going to have to save some funds. Now, if there's anybody here that wants to have anything more than a rollback, I'll certainly support a rollback on our millage rate. But then we're going to have to be a lot tougher on our expense side of the equation with the city and defer some of these things. And what's concerning me is next year they've accelerated the beach renourishment, which, you know, whether or not that actually happens or not is another thing, and whether or not when we have to make that expense. But we have some big numbers coming up, and I think we're going to have to be very fiscally sound this year moving forward with our budget. And I can't emphasize that because I've got a list of things that I would not support in terms of equipment. You mentioned some of the education and training. I think we need to evaluate that. That's part of one of your questions I went over with Brianne this morning. And I'm sorry to hog up this time, but I think it's important that we realize that we've really got to get down to the nitty gritty this year. And I know everybody's given Brianne questions. I have as well, but I just want to be sure that everybody knows that I'm going to be looking at these things with a fine-tooth comb and trying to find ways we can save money so we can, if we go to rollback, our reserve number was something like 771,000. That's probably one of the lowest numbers we've had in reserves if we go with the budget as proposed by the city. That's all.
Brianne?
I just want to add on page 39 in your agenda packets, we did do a breakdown of what it means to the home value, to the homeowner themselves with the rollback and the current rate. So the average, if your property is, we just did a $300,000 property value, but it's a $10 difference from going to rollback. You save $10 for every $300,000 of your house, just to see the perspective of going from the current rate to the rollback rate.
I would also hate for us to, you know, I do want to lower taxes and go to rollback, but I would also hate for us to, you know, to do that and then the city goes and slashes jobs that, you know, where they could have not bought a vehicle. Like, we're not the ones who are making the choices on where they're going to be saving money, right? So but I do want to lower taxes for people, right? So, but what about things like special interest activities? I mean, is that something that where they can look at? Like, is that the funding that goes to the 4th of July that they just didn't have, that they can reimburse us for, that kind of thing?
The special interest is really like programming and we're going to be impacted this year from that because there was no summer camps, there was no, there's no after school programs. There was a lot of things that we lost out on.
Right.
We don't know how it will look next year for those things.
Well, we didn't have the expenses for it, but we also didn't have the revenue for it.
Correct. There were other expenses outside. I mean, extra cleaning supplies and things like that that took over some of that. So, but there were not.
So they haven't factored that into this budget at all in terms of the effect of COVID on the revenues and the expenditures.
It will affect us this current fiscal year that we're in more than next year. Beach stickers were pretty much sold, and they're still. I spoke to the supervisor down at the community center who's handling all the beach sticker sales, and I watched as people pulled in, and they're still pulling in and buying their beach permits because there's very limited places to go these days to social distance. So a lot of people are visiting the beaches now that they're open. So that is still happening. I think we'll still sell beach stickers this next fiscal year. I don't know how programming, how after school programs, how all that stuff will look. And I think that's where we'll see a significant change. And it will impact us this year too.
Right.
Chairman, go ahead, Steve.
If I might, Bob, if we all recall last year over what we perceived to be a minimal increase in the millage rate in terms of the actual dollar amount, we heard quite a bit from the public about their opposition. $10 on a $300,000 home isn't a lot by any stretch of the imagination, except to the family whose breadwinners have gotten laid off and are trying to live on unemployment plus the supplement plus their plus whatever they have in the bank. And to them, that $10 even over the course of a year means something because they see the actual $10. To the shopping center owner, whom now may be looking at a 20 or 30% vacancy rate, if not 20 or 30% of his tenants being arrears in their rent and their common area charges, that $10 amounts to a lot more. So we have to bear that in mind. I think we have to be cognizant too of the drops in revenue we're going to experience for the lack of camps, after school programming, et cetera. The upcoming year or years are going to be a challenge for us. There's no two ways about it. I think we need to give our taxpayers every possible break that we can give them. And I think the city needs to be cognizant of that. I don't want to cut jobs. I don't want to see somebody who's got a family to support now trying to figure out what they're going to do because they've been laid off by the city because we can't fund a position. I want to fund every active position. I don't want to fund positions that are just there on a maybe, on a spec. We have to be cognizant of all these things. And I think if we can go to the rollback rate. I'm supportive of that. And I'm sure the city will want to work with us in every way possible to get the most out of every dollar that they get from us in revenue and the most that we get in tax revenue. And like Bob said, we're just going to have to be sharper with our pencils. We're going to have to sharpen our pencils, and so will the city, and be very smart about how we allocate our funds.
Madam Chairman, that's Bob. Just one comment is that I have no interest in seeing someone lose their job with the city. But I do think that, as Steve mentioned, there are some jobs that never get filled during the year. And secondly, I don't know, we're always talking about hearing best practices from Michael. I'm just wondering, from a best practices standpoint, are there staffing decisions that they could be made? Like, for instance, now I know there's individuals that may be still being paid but are sitting home. I know our resources are not being used like at Swim and Racket, but I think to Craig's point too, let's find some volunteers that could. I know the volunteers do work over at Red Reef Golf Course. There's some volunteers that put in a lot of hours over there. But I just think that there may be times where, we have to, throw another couple of $1,000s in maintaining that piece of equipment rather than buying a $60,000, tractor. But with that said, what I would like to propose is that we make a motion that we go to a rollback tax rate of 0.8818 for the coming fiscal year. And knowing that that number itself right there cannot be raised, but it can be lowered.
I second.
Madam Chair, I guess just clarification for the process is that there are 3 meetings related to the tax rate. And if you set the rollback rate now, you do not have an option to go to the existing rate. And so the rate does not have to be set until the final meeting in September, I think it is. So to
excuse me, if I may just very quickly, Madam Chair, you need to have a tentative rate submitted to the property appraiser by the end of this month, by August 1st. You have 2 budget hearings in September, at which time you'll adopt a final millage rate and your final budget. But you'll have to have a preliminary millage rate submitted by the end of this month. You do have 2 more meetings this month at which you can set a tentative or preliminary millage rate. And that's the cap that you cannot go below during your budget hearings in September.
Thank you, Jacob. Yes. As you pointed out earlier to me that in order to, if you set a tentative millage rate at the rollback rate at this point, it would be very complex and very expensive to try to raise it. It
is. There's a mechanism under state law that allows you to increase beyond what you would set as a cap, but it requires first-class mail notice to every taxpayer within the district. And there's a specific process under state law that would allow for it. Typically, the tentative millage rate that you establish would become a cap, which you can then go below at your final hearings in September.
So that said, with all due respect to the experienced team of Rollins and Engel, I would really recommend that we, for this first round, we just take the current rate and then we go back and focus on how we're going to sharpen our pencil to get to the rollback rate. You may find that you want to be somewhere in between. Because I'm just, we need that extra little bit of time, I think, to flush out some of the other items in this budget, capital-wise, and get agreement with the city on it. And I just hate to box ourselves in. I'm all on board with trying to, focus, just trying to get us to a rollback rate. But that rate, the 0.9147, the current rate is not far off, and there's no reason to lower it or get to yourself into a final position until really September in those budget meetings.
Well, Mr. Ernst, we have a motion that was seconded, so we will have to vote unless Mr. Rollins wants to withdraw.
I will not withdraw, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins.
Oh, am I muted?
No, you're fine, Aaron.
Okay. Craig, I totally understand where you're going, but if you look at it and look at just, we have to look at the public as a whole and to go down. And I think, we're eventually just going to vote on and go to rollback. I think that's kind of where we're going to be, I would hope. So if we set our budget at that, I think we'll be able to tighten our boots even more, knowing that our budget is even lower. And it's not that much lower. And I've talked to Brianne, and she is secure in the fact that we could do either one. So I think the city knows where we're at. They know where they're at, and they know they're going to have to tighten their strings too. So I'm ready to vote on the millage, the proposal that Bob set forth already now. So, but I just wanted to say that I understand where you're at.
I'm just going to point out to you again that some of these numbers are very soft. And so that interest number that you have in there for 400,000 at this stage in the game is not going to be 400,000. It's some number less than 200,000. And so I ask you to think through each one of those numbers on that page to make sure you think you're going to get 1,000,004 on charges for park fees and services. I'm saying I'm not comfortable with this budget to say that you're going to get that. And that having that additional time or flexibility, why box yourself in? I'm all on board.
How are you going to know? Even a month or two from now, you're not going to have a better estimate on that number.
You absolutely will. Yeah, I think each one of these numbers I think it's on us as well as the city. It's a combination. And if you take the lower number, just know that you've limited yourself on the top side. And if you want to do that, that's okay, but you need to realize that it may not come in this way. And so there's no reason to box ourselves in at this point in time, just to say you have the rollback rate. That's all I'm saying. So,
Brianne, is Mr. Timberlake on?
I just messaged him now.
Yeah,
he's here.
I mean, keep in mind also too that we have that $5 million in there for the golf course construction as well, that we have budgeted for next year.
Merv, do you want to weigh in on the interest rate that you came up with?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
What was the question on the interest income? I mean, part of the deal with the interest income is that we get the heavy tax bill from the taxes from our taxpayers in November, December, and January. And we traditionally have not been sending payments to the city because we have not been billed until the April, May, June timeframe. So a lot of the interest, I think this year we already have 256,000 or something through the end of May. I don't have that in front of me right now, but.
Yeah, but here's my point, Merv, and I'm going to be clear about it, is that there's over 25 million in the account, okay? And so in the SBA account, we only earned 11,000 last month on 25 million. If you double it and say it's 50 million, you're barely over 200,000 in interest earnings. Interest rates are near zero, okay? So those numbers that you may have earned in the beginning, you can't use a trend line of saying where it's going. Interest is a forward-looking assumption. So I just call into question that one. It's small in the whole part of things. The rest of it, I don't know.
I guess the question I would have is, I mean, that's small. I guess the other one that's, I don't have a handle on right now, and hopefully we'll have a handle on within 45 days, is the fees that we collect at the different park places. Because we got fees through February, but after that, pretty much everything shut down. So I don't have a really good handle on what those, the user fees are going to be, because they're going to change dramatically. So,
correct. It could be better, could be worse. I don't know. If it's just.
Well, I mean, depending on beach, I mean, a lot of it they collect early in the year, but I mean, what it is for next year, it just depends on when we get back to some type of normalcy. Let's see, through the end of May. we had collected 256,000. Yes. So.
And I'm going off of what was in June, for June
Yeah,
interest earnings.
You know, I mean, like in January, we got 47,000.
Different interest rate. After COVID hit, nothing in January, February.
That's one of our higher months of, having more in the bank is January, February. But
yeah,
I agree. I mean, it could come down. Yeah, I mean, last year we were really fortunate, made that $600,000 because we put it back in the SBA again. Yay! This year it's going to be. I'm sure we might hit 400,000 this year. You get close to it probably, but next year it could change to 200,000. But it's only 200,000 less than what I projected. But like I said, the one that concerns me is the user fees. What they're going to come in because, there are no special events going on. We had at the Sugar Sand Park anymore, and so that number, once we start seeing the numbers for April and May for the user fees, we'll be able to start have a better handle on what that will be for next year.
When do we get those user fees? When can we get those user fee that
Well, they bill us monthly, and they go through the process of taking them off again. So it's a matter of looking at them. I mean, normally we don't look at them much during the year because they do a lot of adjustments in September. But we'll start looking at them. I mean, I heard some rumors that beach stickers had increased substantially, and we get a share of those. So.
I mean, what would be worst case scenario?
The swimming pool attendance, dropped down. The camp fees are gone. So that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
we'll have to get a handle. We'll have to get a handle on that. Hopefully, by when we talk about, once we get the June city closing, we should be, we'll have 3/4 of the year at least to see where we are with those.
Yeah, the other thing that concerns me, quite frankly, and we didn't talk about it, is and we're getting to it. There's a $2.2 million O&M March fee, which is in the payables, which I'm going to ask later for us to defer that. Part of the reason I'm asking to defer it is to better understand why it's so big. And that's the month of March that basically we were closed down. And so it goes to another question of what is payroll really look like in a closed park? What are we evolving to? And I don't know how much work you've had with the city, Merv, to get comfort level.
I think Brianna has told me, I don't know this for sure, but Brianna is the one who told me that the city continued to pay employees, part-time recreation employees as well during the month of March.
Whatever the policy is, the city for paying employees, that's fine. The question to me is it more than what we budget? And what do we have done?
But Craig, you could have the city pays every 2 weeks, so there are two months a year where the city has 3 payrolls, and I don't know if March was a 3 payroll month, but when that happens, of course, that really screws up the percentages. We had I think a couple of months where we were like $1 million, which is way too low.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, let me interject to one thing. First of all, with the special interest, it's an in and out. So, the expenses and the revenue are just about a wash. So, I mean, I don't think there's necessary to talk too much about that line item. As far as the payroll, Craig, to my question, if the city's being reimbursed to some degree by the county for some of these expenses that's being funded by the United States government, then we should be taking advantage of that. Should be to our advantage also in keeping some of our expenses down. Because in my operation, we did a PPP and they paid our payroll for 8 weeks and strengthened my bottom line tremendously, since that's going to be the debt's going to be, the way I see it, about 100% of that's going to be forgiven. And then to Aaron's point also, we have $5 million in our budget for the golf course. And while I'd like to think that we're going to have an opportunity to spend that in 2021, I'm not so sure how we're going to get to that point when the city hasn't been giving us any feedback about our design, and where do we go from there? So I'm comfortable. I understand what Craig's saying, but I do believe that we have a reasonable budget. And I think that there's ways that we can trim this, some of the expenses down so that possibly we can even add to the bottom line a little bit.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to call the question. JoAnn, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Or, Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Ray.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, JoAnn. Okay, on page 40, the payroll and invoices, I'd like a motion from the treasurer, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I'm amending the cash disbursements until we have an opportunity to look, and we'll bring it back for the next meeting. There is one item there for $2,200,065,825.93. We're going to defer that to the next meeting. So I'm asking for a motion to approve $62,755.09.
Second.
I think Mr. Engel has the second. Any discussion, commissioners? Would you do a roll call?
Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Vogelsang.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Ray.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports and discussion items. Executive Director Harms, would you please start us off?
Yes, commissioners, we did finish, thanks to Mr. Horowitz's help and also Mr. Timberlake, we finished our CRA application to the city, so we are sending that over to them this week. So they will have that application and that was our request to be released from the CRA obligation. So we'll hopefully have an idea of how that will work out shortly. I know the city is only meeting one time. Their next meeting is in 2 weeks. So maybe we'll hear something about it at that meeting. I did get an email from Mr. Wika today asking if I had time next week to talk about golf. I said, of course, it's my favorite subject. So hopefully we can have some time next week to talk about the golf course, and maybe at our next meeting, I'll have some insight on where the city is with the approval process. Our audit is complete for this year. There were no management notes, and the issues from our audit last year were all addressed. I want to thank JoAnn and Murr for coordinating all the documents and getting everything to our auditors so quickly. And I want to thank Stella and Raquel and the team at Growler Associates for their patience. It was a little different this year doing things with such distance between us. Usually they come in the office, unload the boxes, but everything was coordinated and figured out, and we dealt with them and got it done. And I appreciate everybody's help with all that. We advertised the RFP for Ocean Strand. We've already had 15 inquiries. So I'm looking forward to getting hopefully a lot of proposals and options back to you all next month. Those are due July 31st. Also, I got some information from the community center section, and also tonight I did get more from Gumbo Limbo too. So there's some exciting things happening at our centers, even though they're closed. Community center section has been working on some virtual programming and getting camp packets out and camp backpacks with some activities out to people. And I have some pictures that I'll forward out to everybody as well. The Bloodsuckers exhibit that we talked about trying to get early, they are actually going to install that on Monday. So the Exploring staff is going to work on getting some programming out online as well for people to take a look at the exhibit virtually, at least until that facility is open to the public. Also, last week, Mr. Petrozelli, who's a neighbor over at Ocean Strand, let me know that there was some work going on the eastern portion of the property, which is the 3 acres we have on the water on the ocean side. City staff uses an access point there to clean up the beach. It's not open to the public. We don't have lifeguards there. There was some wooden steps that went down to the ocean, and I was notified that there was a path being put in and some Moby mats being put in, and the steps had been removed. So the concern was that somebody had taken the RFP and started doing work or something along those lines. The city had good intentions in that they were trying to remove the steps as a safety concern. Unfortunately, we didn't approve that or have any authorization on it ahead of time. So they've assured us that in the future, when they make improvements on our property, they will let us know ahead of time. But that was done, and hopefully we'll just work on getting some better communication with the city staff on what they're doing on our properties before they do it. And that is my report.
Thank you. And did you have something you wanted to share with the board about the Sugar Sand Park? Some of the things that need to be done over there at the community center?
Yeah, I actually took Commissioner Rollins through there this morning. We walked through. I think that there's some things that could be done inside. I'll send out a report on that outside of this meeting. And just part of that was for some of the budget requests. We wanted to go look at that facility and see what's happening. And I have gotten additional information that I had not gotten before. There's apparently weekly updates that go out, and I hope that we can start getting those more frequently, because it helps to see what's happening in those facilities. So I'll put that out there to all of you next week. I mean, tomorrow, not next week.
Okay, that would be great. Also, we have a meeting scheduled for July 27th. That would be canceled since we just passed the tentative millage rate.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
That is all for me.
Okay. District Council, Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one brief item. The board, I recall last month, our office was authorized and directed to engage Steve Watts at Calvin Giordano to prepare a certified legal description of the Ocean Strand property. Mr. Watts completed his work. We went ahead and got the certified legal and recorded the declaration of restrictive covenants last week. We forwarded a final recorded version to each of you, along with to the executive director for the district's files. But that item is now recorded in the public records of Palm Beach County and will continue to encumber the property known as Ocean Strand unless it's otherwise released pursuant to the terms set forth in that declaration. So that's wrapped up. That's the only item I have, Madam Chair. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Commissioners, Mr. Engel, would you like to start us off?
If you insist. We've talked all night tonight about the possibility of shortfalls in revenue. We've talked about using more volunteers, and something I've been giving thought to, and we've done this before, is or something like it before. What I'd like to do is I'd like to propose setting up a foundation, Beach and Park District Foundation, if you will, that will enable residents, non-residents, any user of our parks to, in effect, buy a brick, such as what we did for the science playground once upon a time. But I'd like to see it expanded. I'd like to see it expanded to cover all our properties. And it can be a brick in a walkway. It can be a bollard. It can be a park bench. It could be a scoreboard. It can be almost anything. And I think this is a great way to get our stakeholders even more involved. The establishment of a foundation would isolate these funds. They wouldn't contribute them to us. And 2 years later, well, my park bench isn't built, where is it? The money will be set aside specifically. I think this is a way of addressing future shortfalls because, as Commissioner Ernst brought up, there are going to be some issues going forward. Maybe, hopefully, we'll avoid them in the upcoming fiscal year. But if we don't, this might be a way of addressing them and a way of getting not only individuals, but nonprofits, corporate entities involved in our projects. I have no problem with DeHarnley Phase 2 being Office Depot Phase 2. Of course, DeHarnley Phase 2 isn't our property, but just as an example. And I think this would be a great way for us to help cover our shortfalls, to get the community even more involved. For those who can't volunteer for time or physical restraints, this is another way for them to volunteer and to get some of our corporate stakeholders even more involved. But I'm just putting it out there. I think it would be a great idea. I'd like Brianne, if she could, to investigate it a little further so we could flesh it out. Jacob, if you could also investigate to see how we could flesh this out, to put together some details, and so we can discuss this at a future meeting.
Jacob, are special districts allowed to create foundations?
Yeah, the short answer is generally yes, and it's not uncommon for local government to have a foundation. Some cities, in fact, have what are known as parks foundations or parks and rec foundations to raise funds for purposes similar to what the commissioner describes. Some other local governments have veterans foundations. I'm aware of one city that has a 9/11 memorial foundation. So the nonprofit foundation is another vehicle that the board could use to essentially raise funds as a supplement to the general fund or for some other purpose set out in the articles of incorporation and bylaws of that foundation. There are some considerations. In many instances, the governing board, this board, could in fact be the board of that foundation as well. Alternatively, the board could appoint a separate foundation of residents, staff, etc. We'd look a little further as to how we would want to have that board structured. What I'm hearing from the commissioners, it may be somewhat of a preliminary discussion at this point. We'll go ahead and do some research, work with Ms. Harms, and add something to a future board agenda for some further discussion, if that's what the commissioner would like to see.
I'd like to see it as a future agenda item, yes.
And as far as costs go, what would legal fees be and filing fees and things like that? I think we need to have that all up front too.
We will put all of that together. The filing fee, I don't know exactly for creation of a nonprofit. Typically, it's a couple $100, which is filed with the state for the entity's creation. Our fees, which are not, it's not all that much legal work that goes into it. There is a little bit in the preparation of the articles of incorporation, preparation of the bylaws, but it's not all that complicated. We could put together a pro forma as to some estimated costs and anticipated costs associated with that process.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I would think that Brianne could be the muscle in this and puts together the program, and then the legal documents would be prepared by, I don't see Jake participating in the research on what we want other than taking what we want and putting it into a legal document. That's what I have in mind. Is that consistent with your thoughts?
Yes, and Steve, I'd like for you to work with Brianne, since you came up with this very good idea, to give her direction and help her out with that. And we will all also give our input.
I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you. Is that all you have today, or would you, do you have?
Well, I could do a 5-minute stand-up, but I think I'll pass on that. That's all I have for today.
Ms. Wright.
I have nothing today.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
I'll
Rollins?
see you in August. I won't be here at the July 20th meeting. I'm going to try, but I don't think I'm going to be available.
Okay, well, safe travels.
Thanks.
Mr. Rollins.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Just a couple of things. In our old days, when we met at the Sugar Sand Park conference room, people were asked to sign in when they came to a meeting. Do we have the capability of knowing who's on our meetings, who listens in on our meetings at all? Or is it somebody logs in and all you see is a telephone number?
You do just see telephone numbers unless they've signed into their computers, but we record all these meetings, and all this information is recorded as well.
Okay. The next thing I have is we'd talked about Jeffrey Street extension and asking, I think, Sam and Jake to investigate whether or not the railroad would allow another crossing there, or what the perimeters were. I think in our last meeting we discussed that, and I don't want to look past that because could have an effect on what we plan to do with the golf course. So I just want to make sure that that's being followed up
very
on.
quickly, Madam Chair, to the Commissioner, thank you. That item is on our radar, Commissioner. After the last meeting, we did make a phone call to the railroad. We're waiting to hear back, but we hope to have an update on that item at your next meeting.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you very much. Just one other item. Let me get to mine. No, I think the only thing is, as Greg mentioned we need to stay laser focused on the golf course, and I think Craig emphasized the need to do that as well. Since we have a master plan, let's stick to it and keep trying to get the agreement from the city to approve our master plan. And that's all, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Rollins. Mr. Ernst. You're muted.
There you go, I'm unmute. Two comments. One is, I hate to go back, but on the rollback rate, I'm supportive of the rollback rate and I voted for it. But what I guess I would like to see, and I was not anticipating that we were going to have the discussion tonight, is that we stick to a schedule. You know, and the schedule is that we were going to set it at the end of July, and that was what we agreed to. So, you know, it gives us a little bit more flexibility to understand things. So, you know, if we're going to set an agenda and a schedule, I would like to stick with that schedule, and you know, rather than bump things up. And then, you know, as far as the foundation goes, you know, we already have, I think this group has founded really the seedings of Gumbo Limbo as a nonprofit organization. And they are the ones that have really taken off and kind of developed Gumbo Limbo into what it is. And it's directly of those volunteers. And we used to have a similar group. All those names out there at the Sugar Sand Playground are those volunteers. So I think it would behoove us to do everything we can to support volunteers in these different areas, which we do, but let's do more of it. So early on when we talked about Boca Chica as a golf course, and I was kind of, you know, in a joint meeting, we talked a little bit about it, and I still am very strongly supportive of the Boca Chica community being more involved in this golf course. There's your volunteer base, and those are the people who have to be, we do need that nonprofit group to be the leaders and getting involved, and that will offset much of the costs. And through them, you know, maybe if they want to donate something or be involved, they can do it. But I think it has to be with specific pockets to get people involved rather than just a general fund to see it. I don't know, but it's just a thought. I think people like to see who are involved in things, be more willing to get engaged, more willing to donate or to do things, you know, at the end of when they want to give their money away. That's all I have.
Thank you. The only thing I have, I am concerned about the environmental impacts on Ocean Strand, and I think we need to consult, and I think Brianne was going to look into someone at Nora at the city to check on what we have to be careful and not disturbing and what we can remove as far as exotics and things like that. So I'm very aware that we need to move very, very carefully on not doing something that would harm the environment over there. And the other thing I have is that I think we should all wish Brianne a happy birthday. Her birthday's coming this week. So happy birthday, Brianne.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there future agenda items that you would like to see on the agenda?
Outside of the research on the foundation and a report on same, I'm good.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Engel, do you have a motion that you'd like to make?
Yes, I do, and it's move to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Rollins seconds. JoAnn, do a roll call vote, please.
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
And Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.